So, Mike, you were talking about a theory you had about Meganthropus. What's that?
Anthropus, yeah. Well, uh, of course, amongst the Bigfoot research community, there's a lot of different opinions about what Bigfoot might be. Of course, it kind of breaks down to it's a fantasy thing. It's imagination. It's a hoax. Uh, oh, that's one theory. The other theory being no, it's something paranormal that kind of blinks in and out of reality that can come and go as it wishes. Then there's the third, which most people prescribe to, and that is that it's a flesh and blood animal, like many others on the planet, just kind of doing its thing. Now, when you start talking about what kind of an animal, people they tend to disagree about whether it's man-like or it's ape-like, and whether it's something completely new or is it something left over from a previous time. Well, we have some examples in here of skulls from different hominids that have existed in the past. And I like to point to those when people bring up the idea, well, where's the bodies if we have these things? Because those are examples of bodies of large primates that could certainly account for the Bigfoot sightings that we've had from all over the world. I mean, if a person, if you take an anthropology course, you're going to hear about Australopithecus, the southern apes. These are the ape men from South Africa that they believe were the first hominids to start taking a movement into being a man, into being a Homo sapiens. So there's these ape men from South Africa. Then you go and you find examples all across Asia of these giant apes called Gigantopithecus, and some people like to say and point to Gigantopithecus and say, well, that's the biggest ape that's ever lived. Bigfoot's a pretty darn big ape or primate, so maybe that's Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus. However, Gigantopithecus, according to most scientists in the main line who study Gigantopithecus remains, which actually consist primarily of teeth, they feel that Gigantopithecus was largely vegetarian, and it was really more of a knuckle-walking ape like a modern gorilla. So it would then have footprints that would be more ape-like, with a toe sticking off to the side. And lo and behold, if we look at the majority of the examples of Yeti tracks, Yeti being the Tibetan version of the mystery apes over there in Asia, and the Yeren of China. These things have feet that are much more ape-like, with that toe sticking off to the side, and you can see it clearly in those tracks in the snow. But there's another animal that was found, or hominid, the remains of which were found in Java, with parts of Indonesia and in the islands there, that some scientists have named Meganthropus, which of course means large man. Now, Gigantopithecus means large ape, and there's a reason, because they think it really was more of an ape-like animal. Meganthropus, they call it large man because they think that it was a much more man-like. In other words, Meganthropus, and we have a reconstruction here that was done by Grover Krantz, based on some parts of a jaw and the parts of the occipital area of the skull. And you take these teeth and jaw parts and you reconstruct them, and you end up with a mandible that's probably twice as big as a human mandible. And then when you then take the other parts of the skull and you reconstruct that and make a face on this thing that will match up the zygomatic arch with the back part of the mandible as it comes up the rami on each side, you end up with a head of pretty good proportions that with a large bony torus around the eyes, with a fairly flat face, and a bit of a sagittal crest. And the cranial capacity of the Meganthropus, and we have one here on display right next to our human skull, is very close to the human-sized cranium. The giganto reproduction that we have, however, has a brain capacity that's tiny compared to the Meganthropus. And then on the other side we have this southern ape, the Australopithecus, and the brain case on that is about the size of a chimpanzee's and is in keeping with this giganto brain. So in other words, Grover Krantz reconstructed giganto with a very tiny brain and with a huge sagittal crest and very wide face, much more gorilla-like. And this Meganthropus skull that we have actually If you take a look at the Patterson-Gimlin film, especially frame number 350, where the animal turns and you can see the face, you can see the nose, you can see the bony ridge around the eyes quite clearly, and the fact that even though it appears to have a bit of a sagittal crest, it's got a fairly human-sized cranial part to the skull, but this huge face with this huge jaw. And I personally think that our Meganthropus skull matches that quite nicely. And to back that even further, we had an anthropologist in here from China. I'll just call him Li because I can't pronounce his last name. I apologize for that. Should probably look that up and have that available here. But he's from Hubei University and works in Hubei province in China, and he dug up a Homo erectus skull, which is actually a lot more like a Homo sapiens skull than your average Homo erectus. And he brought it in here to the Bigfoot Museum, and we compared it with Grover Krantz's Meganthropus reconstruction, and they matched up quite nicely. These were both about the same size, and they're indicative of a hominid that would have been walking upright and had, well, it probably had a height of 7 to 8 feet, and your typical Bigfoot sighting involves an animal of 7 to 8 feet. So I'm personally tending towards Meganthropus as a better choice for you know, a progenitor that could actually be where Bigfoot came from.